to White, over to Caruso for the lead! Time here, turn up the 18! Woo!
Hello and welcome back to Sea Red UK, where quite simply it's Chicago Bulls thing. This podcast is part of the Fans at First Sports Network, so wherever you're listening, rate, review, subscribe, helps us out and ensures you don't miss another episode. And if you're lucky enough to be watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe, give us a thumbs up and leave some comments down below. I'm Matt, and as usual, joined by Neill. How are we doing, Neill?
I'm pretty good, actually. Looking forward to tonight. We have a special guest coming on, which I'm sure you're going to tell everybody all about now.
Yeah, we've got Bulls beat writer Julia Poe of the Chicago Tribune coming on for a chat. It's been in the works for a couple of weeks now. Slight bit of rescheduling had to happen because of your hectic lifestyle. But yeah, so just for reference, it's currently 11 o'clock at night here in the UK as we started recording, and it's also on the back of a game. So we've both been up since 12:30 last night was the tip on it against Hawks, and yeah, we're still going. And then we've got a game tomorrow night.
Yeah, why not? Sure.
So who needs sleep? Who needs sleep? So yeah, obviously, just quickly, Bulls got if there is such a thing as a must-win game at this point of the season, they got it last night, didn't they?
Yeah.
Against the 10th seed Atlanta Hawks. Obviously, Bulls been competitive in the 9th seed. Didn't start particularly well, and they eventually got it done. Kobe somehow found some energy from somewhere in the 4th to help get it done, but obviously the main man was Ayo throughout the game on it.
Yeah, Ayo was incredible.
You know, career high in points, matched his career high in threes from the game against Magic on Saturday. Yeah. So obviously we've got a few questions about the sort of that young core as such for Julia, so won't go into it too much. But yeah, it's getting ready for the All-Star break now, and I think everybody's just ready for a bit of a break, aren't they? Us included.
Yeah, I'm definitely ready to get maybe a couple of nights sleep instead of having to juggle everything. But at the same time, it's a pity we don't have any representation from Chicago at all at the All-Star break. At least in the past, even if there wasn't somebody on the floor of the All-Star game itself, there was somebody either in the rookie sophomore game, or there'd be somebody in the skills challenge or the 3-point contest. But to have absolutely nothing is great for the players to get the rest, but it kind of takes the interest away for us Bulls fans, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I won't be watching. I'm not going to get up at, I think, is it 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock? I can't remember now, on Monday morning, which I'm actually off work as well, so definitely not getting up. I'll take full advantage of having, I've got 5 days off after tomorrow, so I'll be taking full advantage of that with no Bulls. So
yeah, you're not any bit intrigued by the 3-point contest with Steph Curry and Ionescu?
Nope.
No?
No.
I am. I'm looking forward to it. I think that's a good twist to do something different and to have the crossover between the NBA and the WNBA. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, but not enough for me to get up at whatever time. I'll just watch the replays of it because I'm sure they'll be all over Twitter and
I'm sure
the NBA app and stuff like that. Plus, I hate the 3-point game, so
yeah, in an actual game, I can understand. I know you don't like the 3-point game, but when it's an isolated, it's almost like a separate sport, isn't it? When it becomes a 3-point contest and nothing else, it's not spoiling anything because it is the game. No, not selling it to you. No, all right,
not at that time in the morning.
No.
So yeah. So without further ado, I'll throw it to the ad read, and when we come back, we will be joined by Julia. So Our partners at USA Sports. USA Sports is a UK-based sports merchandise retailer. They cover the NBA, NHL, NFL, MLB, as well as Formula One. From hats to hoodies, there's something for fans from everywhere. From Chicago Bulls to Team Red Bull and everywhere in between. So go check them out at usasports.co.uk and enter the code CREDUK at checkout to take advantage of the discount. So yeah, it's welcome back, and it's a welcome into Julia Poe of the Chicago Tribune. Thank you for joining us, Julia. How are you going?
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm doing pretty well.
Excellent. Yes. Great to have you on. We've been really looking forward to this and having a chat about the current situation with the Chicago Bulls.
Definitely.
Yeah, so obviously the sort of big news recently is the standing pat at the trade deadline. Did you expect any moves at the trade deadline, or sort of get any inkling? We've been around the team that something was going to happen, or?
For sure. We were well aware for kind of that week that some of those lower level moves were in play once the Levine injury happened. And I mean, even before that, it was just so clear that you weren't going to have that big max contract star moving at this deadline. So it became a lot more of kind of a retooling deadline for them rather than kind of a big swing. And so that obviously reshaped things about like 5 days before. It looked like there were some moves, kind of the standard chatter that you hear with those Drummond, Caruso, DeRozan pieces. I think those are kind of always focal points and especially had been this year. But I think this was a very clarifying deadline in a lot of ways, especially just for kind of how the front office sees trade deadlines in general and when they prefer to act, which appears to be in the summer. So I think it was very interesting just for that reason, in that it's not like they were just sitting there not picking up calls and not making calls, but at the end of the day, they did not feel that level of pressure of like, we have to go now just because it's the trade deadline.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling that we started to get as it became more and more apparent that Zach was less likely to get moved, partly down to the right option not being out there, and also down to the fact that he was carrying the injury. Unfortunately, I think a lot of fans were hoping for at least some sort of like a big swing, as you say, but it just wasn't happening, and nothing ended up happening altogether.
So, what was the general sort of vibe around the team in the sort of maybe the last 2-3 days building up to the deadline, and then I guess after it, when obviously they was down in Memphis for the shoot around, and it becomes clear that nobody is getting moved? Does it kind of, the vibe change? That, is there a bit more? Are they a bit more free, I guess is the word?
For sure. I honestly think they were in such an interesting position this year where the guys that the three names that I mentioned, Andre Drummond, Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan, that were in that conversation, they're all vets that are so used to their names being in trade conversations that I'm sure it bothers them in like a private way, but they're not a young guy that's getting their name floated for the first time where it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Behind the scenes, there's a lot going on. But in terms of like external factors, DeMar's still DeMar, Drum's still Drum, Caruso is still Caruso. So I don't think that there was much of a difference. Maybe the only thing is just like, and this has been true this entire tenure with this team, they really like playing each other or playing with each other. They really like each other just in general. You see how DeMar is with these young guys, with Kobe, with Io, with Pat, like they're really bought in with each other. And I think that's why, put aside some of the scruples of how night one went with the season, with having the players only meeting or whatever, but like these guys like each other. They don't have a lot of like conflict in terms of that locker room stays pretty locked in with one another. So I think maybe the only lift is just being like, okay, cool. We get to keep going together. Like we like playing together. I think the only thing that I would truly say in terms of like a negative vibe in the locker room is just these guys are tired. They could use the trade deadline. They're not going to say it, but with the injuries, with the minutes rotation, with how much Kobe and DeMar are being asked to do, I think that was the only thing I got in the last week. It's just like these guys need they need a breather. They need a couple days off, and they'll really value that. But in terms of the actual trades, I think most of that was staying pretty private, which is the best you can do, I think, in that situation.
Yeah, Kobe is definitely looking gassed at the moment. He looks tired on the court even. And he's number one in minutes in the NBA right now. So he's definitely being pushed to the max. However, he's still been performing pretty well. I mean, Kobe's season has been pretty impressive. Matt has always been very much in his corner. I almost lost faith in Kobe White, and he has definitely been proving me and many others wrong. He's been phenomenal this season.
Definitely. I think the thing that helps people really keep that faith in Kobe that are around him is when you see the work ethic. And we've been hearing that from his teammates since long before this breakout happened, and from coaches and from execs. Like, this started 2 years ago. It started not last summer, but the summer before that. And all through last season, you'd talk to guys and they'd be like, Kobe's got it coming. Like, it's coming, just wait. And I think when someone's able to create that consistency with their work ethic rather than it just being a talent thing, I think that's where a lot of that promise really shines through. It's a big leap this year, but it came from a lot of prep work in past summers.
Yeah. We see a lot of that in Dalen too, actually. Dalen Terry seems to have that same sort of mentality that Kobe had early on, where it's not necessarily the talent that's shining through. It's more the positivity and the work ethic, as you say. And like we've always said about Dalen Terry, you give him a minute and he'll make that minute count on the court. He might make mistakes, but he doesn't let them bother him. He just keeps pushing forward, which is something we see in him and we like in him as well.
Definitely. I think with Dalen, when he was picked, and even now looking at that pick, my one quibble in general is just the idea of picking up multiple players that are going to be shooting projects where they're going to need like years with Peter Patton and that crew to kind of get their shot to the level that it needs to be at. And we see that with Dalen. I mean, he's not afraid to take it. God bless him. He will lock and load at any point in time, but he's got to work on that mechanic. He knows it. He's putting in the time. And with where this team was at shooting wise when they drafted him and where it's been at in past seasons, I think that was my only thing where I'm just like, what are you doing in terms of construction and what's your timeline? If you have time to be patient with that, great. But we've seen so many of the other things that he can do well really starting to translate. I like the way he follows shots to the rim. I like the way that he kind of is able to be that go guy and crash. And if he can get that shot profile up, I think that's when that'll come around. I don't know if it'll get to Kobe levels, but just getting it serviceable to where he's a little bit more consistent and can draw that defense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you just spoke about players being tired and looking forward to the All-Star break. Obviously the buyout market is now in full flow. Mm-hmm. Do you see Bulls making a move? I mean, obviously it tends to be where AK does make a mid-season move. Mm-hmm. Maybe not to the sort of delights that Bulls fans would want, but obviously it did say on Saturday, was it before the Orlando game, Billy come out and said that nothing's moving forward, however management aren't opposed to it, sort of thing. So do you see that being an option for Bulls, and if so, what sort of player do you think they'd go for?
Definitely. I think it's definitely an option. I think kind of important timing in this is that Patrick Williams gets reevaluated this Wednesday. And I think the results of that reevaluation will be really important in that. If Pat's like good and can come back quickly, then maybe you kind of look at it and you're like, just in terms of the players that you need. If he's going to be out longer and he's not been running, he's been completely off that foot over the last 2 weeks. If his timeline looks a little bit longer, I think you have to go look for some length, because that's the biggest issue where this team is at. Just looking at the power forward position, already having to move Caruso into that. And then when Caruso comes out with injury, which is just guaranteed to happen with how he plays, then you're stuck trying to work these rotations out with like Javon Carter filling in these minutes. And that's putting the entire team at a size disadvantage where they're not flexible already. They're having to go with that too big look where you've got Vooch and Drum in there. And that's been working well, but just the flexibility, I think they would really benefit from being able to find maybe a lengthier wing, someone to maybe help out with shooting a little bit. Problem is that players on the buyout market are often there for a reason. And so you have to be realistic about the way that you can actually retool and upgrade in that way. But it does feel like with injuries, especially like I said, if Patrick's out for too long, I do think you have to look at it as just like we need another body in here. We've got the roster spot. Let's just see what we can make work.
Yeah, obviously we've got the injuries already as it is, obviously with Zach and everything like that. Obviously Torrey Craig's come back in the last week or so, and every time he steps on the floor, I mean, we both love Torrey anyway, what he brings and everything like that, but he's kind of gone a little bit like Caruso, where you think every time he's stepping on the floor you think, oh, he's going to get hurt. And obviously he was off his minutes restrictions last night against Hawks, and he played well. He had the typical Caruso type stat line as well, but he hits the floor and you're thinking, oh God, he's out, and we can't afford to lose him again, as well as Caruso constantly been on the IR. And so, like you say, we've said for a long time that the roster construction just doesn't seem right, basically, and especially if you're going to go with that Twin Towers. And I know Neill's got a question about AK, which I'll let him throw in now.
Yeah, actually, before I move on to that, just a quick, is Pat still in the boot?
You know what? I have not seen him in a second, so I don't want to. I haven't seen him since before the Super Bowl, so on Saturday. So I don't know most recently. I do know that the last time I talked to Billy, he was saying that like all he can really do is he's on the stationary bike and he comes into the gym in the evening and he sits on a box and shoots. So that's like the level of not putting any impact on him that they're at right now. They're not even letting him like jump or stand for shooting.
Right. So it's not exactly on the cusp of him coming back then.
No.
Yeah. So moving on then about the Arturas thing. His presser that he did via Zoom after the trade deadline and nothing happening in the trade deadline did upset a lot of Bulls Nation and a lot of the fan base. When he first came to Chicago, he promised a departure from mediocrity. You know, it was what he said that they wouldn't, accept in Chicago and in that market. And now they're competing, and competitiveness was the new word that he used, for I suppose, a play-in position, possibly maybe scraping up to playoff position number 6, which is, in a lot of people's eyes, the definition of mediocrity in the NBA, right? Do you think he's kind of lost sight of his initial plan and what he was trying to set out to achieve, or is he just become content and hanging his hat on mediocrity now?
It's a good question. I'll start with the play-in tournament just in general, and that I think that's such a tough thing because, like, I don't know, I talk about hope a lot being too much of a driving factor in the way that just people structure teams, the way that fans ask for teams to be structured. And I think the play-in tournament is like a really key example of that, where you have teams like Miami that can somehow will their way out of the play-in tournament and, make it all the way to the finals. And you look at something like that and you go, well, then, yeah, being in the play-in tournament is competitive because we could do that. And I think I love the play-in tournament as like a person who enjoys watching basketball. And I think the games are really competitive, had a blast covering it last year. But I think for a team in the Bulls situation, it can be a little bit of like a rock and a hard place where you look at it and you're like, well, this is technically competitiveness, but if we go multiple years in a row and all we're doing is winning one play-in game and then losing the next, and then we're on, vacation by mid-April, what exactly is the growth here? So to answer with that in mind, to answer your Arturas question, I think, yes, the original vision has been lost sight of in a lot of ways just because it blew up. Like the original vision that he put together, and I'm not like stumping for it, but it did work until one of the key pieces his body stopped working.
Right.
And then from there, everything that's happened with Levine and just kind of the way that that roster has kind of maybe lost its central axis a bit from there. That original project, like, yeah, they've lost that vision because that vision's not coming back. Even if Lonzo does make a full recovery next season, like the Levine situation is in such a different place. DeRozan is a few years older. Like, it's just the moment was there and was lost. And I know
Right.
people don't like lingering on that. And I think from there, it does feel like they've just stalled out a little bit in terms of, like, they're not bad. Like, it feels bad because they're right under 500 and they're not up where people would like them to be, but they're not Charlotte. They're not, they're not in the, like, gutter. They're just kind of chilling on the sidelines, kind of being part of the conversation, but not really actually getting in the mix with anything. And I think there is that, like, not quite a fear, but it's just, that's where they're getting stalled out, is not wanting to take a risk. And in doing so, they're putting themselves in a position where they could end up getting down into that gutter in a few years if they can't get things going in any kind of direction. And now you're stuck where you've got Levine's contract and Lonzo's contract, and it's just like they keep miring themselves in situations from a little bit of a slowness. And that's coming from someone who, I've never been in these conversations in terms of a front office executive. I don't know how hard it is to be nimble, but it does feel like there's just a little bit of that lack of nimbleness of being able to, like, click in that moment and be like, we got to go, we got to move off this, we have to get out of here. So I don't think it's like an acceptance of mediocrity. I think it's like they are stalling out, and kind of, again, they were ready to move Zach, and then he has the worst season of his career due to injury, and you're stuck. So yeah, they're just, I think they're just kind of stalling out.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen obviously the rise of Kobe and Ayo in particular from this sort of young core.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that has maybe had an effect on what sort of direction AK is trying to take things in? Because Kobe's kind of stepped up for Lonzo in a way and filled that void. And if we'd have seen Zach, obviously more than we have seen him, that's kind of the vision that AK had initially. And it kind of feels like he is picking that direction now of trusting this young core a lot more. Obviously, it now needs to come down to the players themselves to earn Billy's trust, I guess, to get the minutes on the court as well, in terms of Dalen and Julian Phillips in particular. Obviously, P. Will's just a complete... I know Neill's a big P. Will fan. I'm still sort of on the fence with him. And I guess we've got that lingering over us with his extension as well. And it just feels like it's trying to fit this young core in, but keep DeMar and Caruso and Vooch around in particular.
Sure.
And it just kind of feels like their rise has maybe changed his mind slightly about what direction he wanted to go in.
I don't know how much it's changed his mind, but I do think it's helping to focus the front office a little bit more. Like, I don't think they're in a position right now, from any conversation I've had, where they're like, oh, we're all in, let's just build around Kobe, let's go. Which I think is like a very level-headed response to have to, like, a breakout season. You don't want to see that happen. They got real lucky with the timing of his extension. Like, perfect. Sometimes you just get lucky. And so I think they know, like, obviously, let's empower Kobe. Let's put him in good positions, but we're not just going to, like, all of a sudden refocus to a guy that's just doing this right now. I think most of what's kind of focusing, again, the sense that we got this week is that trade deadline was not the priority period for them. The summer is. And when you look at some of those contracts like DeMar, like Patrick, that kind of makes sense, where it's like, okay, let's figure out those two pieces and then let's move from there based off of whether both of those guys are staying or one's going, one's staying, etc. So I think that Kobe being what he's become, Like that makes you feel better about not having, if Lonzo's not able to come back, which is something they'll get more clarity over this summer as well. Again, it's just, there's a lot of clarity that's going to come from these contracts, from these injury decisions, et cetera, this summer. And I think that having a young, incredibly promising, incredibly bought in player who's also your star playmaker at the center, like focusing those decisions, I think it's helping. But I don't think him having this year is making them just grab the reins and be like, okay, let's pull over here and go this way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of does feel like they need to keep DeMar around for a little bit longer just to make sure it is Kobe's team as such moving forward. And I mean, like Neill said before, I'm a massive Kobe fan. I've been, from the start. But I did say on our last pod as well that the way Bulls Nation on Twitter and that are building him up, he's not really done anything spectacular NBA wide. Do you know what I mean? He's still, he doesn't feel like he's had that one breakout game yet that everyone's looking at him and going, wow, this is here. He's arrived properly.
Right.
He's just, he has put himself up there. He has put Bulls up there. Because without him, this season would have been just, or it feels like it'd have been an absolute nightmare. Obviously, the likes of Julian Phillips and Dalen Terry, they were pretty much out of the rotation at the start of the year, and we've had to go through this next man up sort of regime, basically. Do you think that them two, well, more so with Dalen, he's kind of worked his way into the rotations a bit more now, and it's something, because at the start of the year, Bulls Nation wanted him gone. They wanted him in China, not even in the G League. Yet last night, he's now becoming a bit of a highlight reel in terms of how Bulls are promoting him. And it kind of feels like he's earned his spot in the rotation now. But do you think it's sustainable with Dalen?
I think it's kind of what I said earlier, where I think progression, like even to the Kobe thing that you were saying, it's not breakout moments. It's like having 20 games in a row where you're consistently doing the same thing. And because Kobe, I mean, even his rookie year, as a longtime fan of his, like he would have those breakout, like, oh, look at this guy shooting moments, and then he'd just disappear the next month. Yeah. And I think that's his progression this year, right? Same thing with Dalen. I think this has been a good step up for him. It came out of necessity, but that's not a bad thing. That's how young players kind of get their reps. I think, like I said before, the shot is something that needs to keep progressing. I think it has, but it just needs to keep going. So, especially if Patrick is out any amount of time, Dalen continuing to get those minutes, him continuing to show himself as a defender, as a guy that can crash the boards, get those offensive rebounds up, get those second chance points up. If he can just keep consistently doing that in this stretch post All-Star weekend, which is going to be so critical for them going into the playoffs of kind of, all of that positioning, and then put in a really good summer. Then next season, I think you look at that like next step up of like, okay, can this guy start really cracking the regular rotation? But it's just, he came in so young. He had so many things that they were very open about. I mean, on his draft night, they were like, this guy's shot needs work. And they've been working on it. I just think it will take that consistent progression. But yeah, I think he's putting the work in. And I think we're seeing that slow progression. And the thing I like about him is that court vision of when the ball goes up, he knows where to go. He gets there. He has absolutely no hesitation or fear. And he's going to put a body on someone. And I think that's why fans love those highlights of him, because he's just, it's kind of the antithesis of what some of the frustrations with Patrick Williams were, where it's like, Dalen's just going to go through someone and he does not care. And sometimes I wish he did, because I worry that he's going to hurt himself, but he gets it done. So I think it's all promising from him. I felt the same way about Julian. He's also incredibly young. And I think the work ethic on both of them, you just kind of, you see it when you're around them on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it's quite exciting that some of those younger players now are beginning to show progression, especially when they are, like you say, the likes of Julian Phillips and Dalen Terry that can provide those kind of highlight reels and get the juices flowing amongst the rest of the players and the fans. I mean, they're both very exciting to watch in transition. Their transition offense is very exciting to see, and even on defense, that double-handed block that we got from Julian Phillips was fantastic.
Yeah.
How much do you think can we credit Peter Patton and his team that they've come in now and they're working with these younger guys, and you can see progression in their shots. You can see the way that they're playing has improved immensely, and that's something we didn't see as much in the past in Chicago in regards to the developing of these younger players. I think it seems to have elevated and even expedited since the introduction of Peter Patton and his team.
Definitely. I think this is like an important, I know how frustrated fans are with the front office, and I think most of the frustrations that we've heard in the last few weeks, especially, very fair. I do think this is one of the like just pure wins for this front office is the way that they have focused on player development. Even having a coach like Billy Donovan be at the head of your program who really cares about developing young players and is obviously very good at it. I think that priority has been helpful and will continue to be helpful in supporting the kind of growth that, like, if Bulls fans are committed to the idea of wanting a rebuild at any time, you have to be ready to have some really raw guys come in and look like goofy sometimes on the court and put like fans have to put in the hours too with that until those guys develop up to the level where they're competitive and can have that moment. And I think what Patton has been doing, what Donovan's been doing, I think just kind of that buy-in, and they've got a lot. Will Gottlieb of CHGO did a really nice piece about some of the systems that Patton uses to bring like data and analysis into the way that they're approaching their shots, and you can see that is allowing that to be a little bit more mindless when someone like Dalen or someone like Julian is loading their shot up. And you even see him working when Lonzo's in Chicago. Peter Patton's out there going around doing reps, working on Lonzo's shot with him. So I think that's really important for just kind of everyone in that program to get better. And it's obviously a little bit overdue, but it's good that they're investing to the level that they are in kind of that arm of the franchise.
Speaking on Billy, actually, sorry, Matt. Do you think sometimes his reluctance to go past his 9 or 10 man rotation, does that not allow the likes of, say, the two-way players like Bitim and Sonogo to get much of a chance? Should he be looking at developing those, do you think, as well?
I think those guys do get a decent amount. I mean, not at this particular moment with the injury situation, but they have been getting a decent amount of reps in the G League where I'm not like overly concerned. Where I get more concerned is when someone like Dalen goes through a season like he did last year where he wasn't playing for either team. That's that's not quite disaster territory, but that's not ideal for any rookie to go through. I think both of those guys, they got enough time in G League. And I think, I don't want this to sound too harsh, but sometimes you have to just be like, we've got this many NBA guys, and then we've got a couple G League guys that maybe can make the jump. And if you're going to win games, you got to just keep the NBA guys on the court. And I think, I don't think that Billy is wrong to go for that. I do think that there are limitations to playing a 7 or 8 man rotation. Obviously, I've talked about how tired some of these guys look, but you also see it with like Javon Carter. Nice game last night, but there are teams that Javon really struggles against because if they're long on the perimeter, there's just very little that he can really do to overcome the fact that hand is always going to get up over his shot. So I would go back and forth on it, but I think, and Billy has like come out of games and been like, I regret the way I handled my rotations tonight. I didn't do what I wanted to, but I think for the most part, when he's in those positions, I think he's going with, I just need the best guys on the court, and I have to trust that they're going to be able to empty the tank. And especially when you've got the All-Star weekend, right. It's right there. Like, they're almost to it. I think he just kind of knows you just empty the tank and hope that guys can reload this weekend.
Yeah. Obviously, we're very conscious of the time. We know you're in Cleveland at the minute, ready for the last game before the All-Star break. I had one last question. Obviously, you're in the locker room. You put the videos out of when you're asking the question, or someone else asks questions. Is there I mean, you don't have to name names as such. We asked Casey Johnson the same when we had him on. Is there a player you particularly look forward to talking to, whether the mood's good or the mood's bad, as in the content they're going to give you? I mean, Casey didn't give us an answer. He was professional.
I'm surprised Casey didn't give you an answer. I mean, I think this one's pretty easy. DeMar DeRozan has metaphors ready for us, like, at any time, to the point where he gets really proud when he thinks of them. And sometimes you'll ask him a question and he'll go to answer it like super, super normally. And then he'll stop and he'll look up at you and he'll be like, wait, hold on, I've got one. And then he'll hit you with, like, I don't know, a boxing metaphor or something like that. And then when he gets to the end of it, he'll look at you and be like, that was good, wasn't it? And it just kills you, So no, I mean, we're pretty lucky. We talked about this on the beat. Good group of athletes to work with. They're very gracious with their time. They do a good job post game. But DeMar, he's out here making jokes about how the Bulls are like his spouse, and he's got to figure out how to make the love work. He's just hitting that pretty much every night. So it's nice to have someone who's both that thoughtful and that consistently willing to crack jokes in that space. It's a good time.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Julia, we thank you so much for your time. We've really appreciated it. We're conscious of the fact that you're limited to what you can give us, and we appreciate every minute that you have given to us. Big congratulations to your Chiefs, by the way.
Thank you very
sporting
much.
The hat.
Oh, yeah.
Good weekend for you.
Great weekend. The best.
So before we let you go off to celebrate or relax or whatever it is you've got to run off and do, tell everybody out there where they can find you and where they can see your work.
Definitely. So I write for the Chicago Tribune. You can follow my work on Twitter at @byjuliapoe. I'm also over on TikTok and Instagram as well at the same handle. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Listen, everybody, go check her out. She does some fantastic work.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course.
So yeah, welcome back, and obviously massive thanks to Julia for giving us the time. Obviously she is in Cleveland getting ready for tomorrow night's game. I mean, who wants to go to Cleveland? I'd probably prefer to be there at the minute, but especially for so, like I say, massive thanks to her, and go check her out on, if you don't already. She just put up them good videos, player interviews and stuff like that. So always worth a good watch.
Yeah, definitely. And so good of her to give us a bit of her time, which we know is precious, and to give us the inside scoop and be able to talk about a few different things and get clarity, I suppose, on a couple of the bits that we talked about too. Yeah,
and it's like we say with a lot of our guests, we could have probably spoke a lot longer.
Oh yeah.
But obviously, in terms of Julia, and like when we had Casey Johnson on, we are conscious of the time, and unfortunately don't get to ask the amount of questions we'd like to. But like we always say, they're all welcome back on.
Absolutely, definitely.
So, as I just said, she is currently in Cleveland ahead of Bulls' last game before the All-Star break tomorrow night against Cleveland. The hottest team in the NBA at the minute.
Well, they just lost the game, didn't they?
Yeah.
But they were at something like 8 or 9 games in a row.
Yeah, they lost to Sixers, was it, last night by a couple of points, I think, didn't they? But they're back to full strength, and we saw what they did to us when they were nowhere near full strength. And obviously, Bulls are nowhere near full strength at the minute either. So, what's your prediction for it?
I'm going to surprise you and say I'm going to go for a win.
Well,
and I'll tell you why. Because they had such a big winning streak. They got knocked off the winning streak last night, and I think that they could quite potentially drop the Bulls on a couple of games now.
yeah, I'm going to go the opposite and say that winning or losing the winning streak hurts them, and they'll want to go into the All-Star break with a bit of a bang as such. And well, at the minute they love beating Bulls, don't they? Is it 6 in a row we've lost to them, something like that?
Yeah. See, would you a win?
Yeah, that number 7. So yeah, I'm saying a loss. Obviously, that will take us into the All-Star break. I'm not interested in the All-Star game, as I said at the start. I'm just going to use it as a break, because then we don't play until I think it's next Friday for us, isn't it?
Something like an 8-day break or something, isn't it?
Yeah, can't wait.
It's like a holiday.
Obviously, we will be back, I'd imagine, before Bulls are back after Cleveland. Obviously, they've got Celtics coming out of the break, which, why not? Why not face the team that was in form and then face the best team in the league?
Yeah. Why not?
They might
Get
have
out of the way, and then we can go on a big win streak after that. Get it moved.
Exactly. I mean, you never know. We may have some new players from the buyout.
Maybe, potentially.
Not Kyle Lowry.
At least it won't be Kyle Lowry.
Exactly. But will AK finally get his man in Danilo Gallinari?
Possibly.
Because we know he likes to get his man. Doesn't matter whether they've been out injured for 3 years. He will go get it.
Now.
Because we have to remain competitive.
Well, look, last night's game was fairly competitive. Let's just take it one game at a time.
Yeah,
and see how it goes.
we had a competitive loss, and now we've had a competitive win.
There you go.
So we are competitive.
It's all relative, right? I mean,
Exactly.
you could say competitive in the league, perhaps not, but competitive game by game. Yeah, okay, maybe that will work.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I say, that's it. Once again, thanks to Julia for joining us. Yeah. And like I say, we probably will be back at some point next week. Don't know what we'll talk about because there will be a Bulls game or whatever, but we'll find something because we always do.
Yeah, exactly.
We've not gone anywhere. So yeah, as always, I've been Matt, and you can find me on Twitter at MattSearidgeUK, and you can find us on all the socials at SearidgeUK.
And I'll be there on Twitter at Neill UK. On behalf of us both and the Fans First Sports Network, thanks once again to everyone for tuning in. Once again, thank you to Julia Poe for joining us. It really was a pleasure. And from both of us, do remember it's a Chicago Bulls thing wherever in the world that you are. Until next time, see red people, go Bulls.